Part 1, The Arena of Destiny. The arena of Vix Prime was a spectacle unlike any other in the galaxy. Its towering metallic walls gleamed under the glow of 1,000 artificial suns, casting an eerie light over the blood-stained sands below. The air buzzed with anticipation as thousands of spectators from countless species gathered to witness the ultimate test of strength and skill. This was no ordinary battle. It was a duel that would decide the fate of two warriors, one, a human soldier with nothing to lose, and the other, a legendary alien warrior queen who had never been defeated. At the center of the arena stood Kara, the pride of the Nihal Dominion. Her towering figure, clad in battle-scarred armor, exuded an aura of raw power. Her deep onyx skin was adorned with glowing violet tribal markings, each one a testament to her victories. Her golden eyes scanned the crowd, searching for one face among the sea of spectators. "I challenge you, human." Kara's voice boomed across the arena, silencing the crowd. Her gaze locked onto Jack Carter, a lone figure standing in the challenger's pit. Jack was a seasoned soldier, his face marked by the scars of countless battles. He had fought on the front lines of the galaxy's most brutal wars, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Stand against me in battle," Kara continued, her voice dripping with menace, "and should you triumph, I will be yours forever." The crowd erupted into cheers, their excitement reaching a fever pitch. The Nihal Dominion's laws were clear: a warrior who was defeated in open combat belonged to their conqueror. For Kara, this was more than a challenge, it was a test of Jack's worth. Jack stepped forward, his boots crunching against the sand-covered floor. He met Kara's gaze, his expression unreadable. "You're serious about this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Kara smirked, her sharp teeth glinting in the light. "Nihal warriors do not speak empty words, human. Do you accept my challenge?" Jack hesitated. He had fought for survival, for duty, but never for something like this. Yet, as he looked into Kara's golden eyes, he saw something unexpected, a flicker of respect. She wasn't just testing his strength, she was testing his resolve. With a deep breath, Jack stepped into the arena. "I accept." The crowd roared as the battle began. Kara moved first, her dual blades slicing through the air with deadly precision. Jack dodged, his movements quick and calculated. The fight was a blur of steel and sand, each strike bringing them closer to the edge of defeat. As the battle raged on, Jack realized that this was more than a fight for survival, it was a fight for destiny. And whether he won or lost, his life would never be the same. Part 2, Clash of Titans. The arena trembled as the force fields activated, sealing Jack and Kara inside the battle zone. The energy dome shimmered around them, ensuring no interference from the outside world. The crowd's roar faded into a distant hum as Jack focused on his opponent. Kara stood across from him, her dual blades gleaming under the artificial light. Her golden eyes burned with a mix of excitement and challenge, her stance relaxed yet predatory. "Last chance to run, human," Kara taunted, her voice low and dangerous. Jack smirked, gripping his combat knife tightly. "And let you gloat about it for the rest of your life? No chance." The war drums pounded, signaling the start of the duel. Kara moved first, her massive frame moving with a speed that defied logic. Her blade slashed through the air in a deadly arc, aiming to cut Jack down in a single stroke. Jack dodged, his boots skidding across the sand-covered floor. He barely avoided the first strike before the second blade came whipping around, aiming for his ribs. Jack twisted, dropping into a crouch as the blade sliced just above his head. The sheer force of the swing sent a gust of wind past him, and he realized just how dangerous Kara truly was. She wasn't just strong, she was fast, precise, and relentless. Kara pressed her advantage, forcing Jack into constant motion. Her strikes came in rapid succession, each one designed to overwhelm him. Jack's mind raced as he analyzed her movements. She favored power over defense, her style aggressive and unrelenting. But every warrior had a weakness, and Jack was determined to find hers. He dodged another attack, feeling the heat of her blade passing inches from his skin. He kept his movements tight and efficient, conserving his energy while making her waste hers. Kara growled, clearly frustrated by his evasiveness. "Fight me, human," she snapped, lunging forward with a vicious downward strike. This time, Jack didn't run. He didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped into her attack. Kara's eyes widened in surprise, but it was too late. Jack ducked under her arm, slamming his shoulder into her ribs as he slid past her. His combat knife lashed out in the same motion, slicing along the exposed part of her side where her armor didn't fully cover. A flash of dark purple blood splattered onto the arena floor. The crowd gasped, their cheers turning into stunned silence. Jack rolled back to his feet, knife held ready. He wasn't foolish enough to think he had hurt her, he had tagged her, drawn first blood, but a wound like that wouldn't stop a Nihal warrior. If anything, it would only fuel her rage. Kara turned slowly, her golden eyes burning. She looked down at the wound on her side, then back at him. And then she laughed, a deep, rich laugh that sent chills through the watching crowd. "You dare to wound me?" she growled, stepping toward him. "Good. Then I don't have to hold back anymore." Jack barely had time to react before she was on him again. This time, she wasn't playing. Her strikes came faster, harder, each one aimed to kill. The air whistled with every swing, and Jack found himself pushed to his limits. He countered when he could, ducking low and driving his blade toward her stomach, but she anticipated his moves, her knee slamming into his ribs and sending him reeling backward. The breath was torn from his lungs, but Jack forced himself to stay upright. He couldn't win against her by force, she was stronger, faster, and deadlier in every physical aspect. But he had something she didn't: strategy. Kara pressed forward, blade raised for a killing strike. Jack let her. He stood his ground, waited until the last possible second, then moved. Instead of dodging sideways, he lunged toward her, stepping into her blind spot. Her blade came down, but Jack twisted his entire body, using the momentum to drive his shoulder into her leg. The force broke her stance, and Kara stumbled, off balance for the first time. Jack took his chance. He spun, bringing his blade up in a quick, brutal slash across her arm. The cut was deep, and Kara staggered back, her breathing ragged. The crowd gasped again, the tension in the arena shifting. Jack studied her, gripping his knife tighter. His heart pounded in his chest. This was it. He had done what no one else had, he had made Kara falter. Kara exhaled slowly, rolling her shoulders. Her chest rose and fell with exertion as she wiped the blood from her arm. She watched him with something new in her gaze, not just rage or frustration, but something deeper. Admiration. "You are," she started, her voice heavy with exertion, "a worthy opponent." Jack frowned, confused by the sudden shift in her expression. "Does that mean you're giving up?" Kara smirked, and then she dropped her weapons. The arena fell silent. Jack tensed, unsure of what was happening. Kara stepped forward, her hands open, her eyes locked onto his. "This fight is not about my victory," she murmured, stepping closer. "It is about yours." The realization hit Jack like a ton of bricks. She was surrendering to him. The rules of the Nihal challenge were clear: Jack had won, and now Kara belonged to him. The announcer's voice boomed overhead, declaring Jack the victor. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Jack barely heard them. He stood frozen, the weight of his victory pressing down on him. Kara stood before him, unarmed and unyielding, her golden eyes locked onto his. "You sure about this?" Jack asked, his voice low. Kara smirked. "You think I do not understand the laws of my own people?" That's not what I meant, Jack muttered. You don't have to do this. You could walk away. Kara's expression shifted, her gaze intense. Is that what you want? For me to walk away? Jack hesitated. No, that wasn't what he wanted. But he wasn't sure he could accept what this meant either. Kara stepped closer, her presence commanding. You think this is about chains? About ownership? It is not. This is about strength. And I have chosen to stand beside the one who bested me. Jack swallowed hard, his chest tightening at her words. This wasn't submission, this was acceptance. And something about that made it even more dangerous. The private chambers beneath the arena were dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of burning oils and incense. Jack stood at the center of the room, arms crossed, as Kara approached. She had cleaned the blood from her wounds, her armor removed save for the ceremonial battle wraps that bound her torso. You are restless, Kara observed, her golden eyes gleaming. I'm just trying to understand all this, Jack admitted, running a hand through his hair. Kara chuckled, low and rich. You are overthinking it, human. This is not slavery. This is a warrior's oath. Jack frowned. A warrior's oath? Kara nodded. You bested me in combat. That means you are worthy. And in my culture, the defeated warrior does not become a servant. They become your shadow. Jack's heart slammed against his ribs. You're saying this is a partnership? Kara smirked. Something like that. Jack exhaled. So what happens now? Kara reached for a small ceremonial blade resting on the stone altar beside them. She met his gaze, lifting the blade between them. You claim your right, she said. Jack's throat tightened. And what does that mean? Kara's smile was slow, knowing. You mark me, she murmured, and I mark you. Without hesitation, she dragged the edge of the blade across her palm, a thin line of dark violet blood appearing against her skin. She offered the blade to Jack, her golden eyes unwavering. Jack hesitated for only a moment before taking the blade. If this was how her people did things, if this was the bond she had chosen, then he would honor it. He cut his own palm, the sting sharp but clean. Kara smirked. Good, she murmured, taking his injured hand in hers. She pressed their wounds together, the heat of her skin shocking him. A pulse of something ancient and primal passed between them, sealing their bond. Jack didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel. But as Kara tightened her grip, her golden eyes locked onto his, he knew one thing for certain, this was only the beginning. Part 3, The Bond of Blood. The ceremonial chamber beneath the arena was a stark contrast to the chaos above. The walls were carved from dark stone, illuminated by flickering torches that cast long shadows across the room. The air was thick with the scent of burning oils and incense, creating an atmosphere that felt both ancient and sacred. Jack stood at the center of the chamber, his mind still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. Kara moved with deliberate grace, her golden eyes reflecting the torchlight as she approached him. She had cleaned the blood from her wounds, her armor replaced with ceremonial battle wraps that left her arms and shoulders bare. The deep scars of old battles marred her dark skin, each one a testament to the life she had lived and the fights she had endured. You are restless, Kara observed, her voice low and steady. Jack exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I'm just trying to understand all this. Kara chuckled, a deep, rich sound that echoed through the chamber. You are overthinking it, human. This is not slavery. This is a warrior's oath. Jack frowned, his gaze flickering to the ceremonial blade resting on the stone altar beside them. A warrior's oath? Kara nodded, her expression serious. You bested me in combat. That means you are worthy. And in my culture, the defeated warrior does not become a servant. They become your shadow. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. "You're saying this is a partnership?" Kara smirked, a glint of amusement in her golden eyes. "Something like that." Jack exhaled, shaking his head. "So what happens now?" Kara reached for the ceremonial blade, lifting it between them. The weapon gleamed in the dim light, its edge razor-sharp. "You claim you're right," she said, her voice steady. Jack's throat tightened. "And what does that mean?" Kara's smile was slow, knowing. "You mark me," she murmured, "and I mark you." Without hesitation, she dragged the edge of the blade across her palm, a thin line of dark violet blood appearing against her skin. She offered the blade to Jack, her golden eyes unwavering. Jack hesitated for only a moment before taking the blade. If this was how her people did things, if this was the bond she had chosen, then he would honor it. He cut his own palm, the sting sharp but clean. Kara smirked. "Good," she murmured, taking his injured hand in hers. She pressed their wounds together, the heat of her skin shocking him. A pulse of something ancient and primal passed between them, sealing their bond. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the weight of the moment settled over him. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was real. An ancient oath sealed in flesh and blood, binding them in a way he barely understood. Kara released his hand, stepping back to study him. "You accept this bond?" she asked, her voice steady. Jack swallowed hard, his chest tightening. "I do." A satisfied smirk curled at the edges of Kara's lips. "Then it is done." The chamber fell silent, the only sounds the distant hum of the arena above and the slow, steady rhythm of their breathing. Jack looked down at the thin line of blood where their wounds had met, the cut already beginning to clot. The weight of what had just happened still sat heavy in his chest. Kara picked up a ceremonial cloth from the nearby altar, wiping the excess blood from her palm. Her movements were measured, practiced, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. "So," Jack finally said, his voice rough, "what happens now?" Kara looked up, her golden eyes glinting in the dim light. "Now, human," she said smoothly, "you learn what it means to have a Nihal warrior at your side." Jack wasn't sure if that was a threat or a promise. Maybe it was both. But before he could respond, the doors to the chamber slammed open, shattering the silence. A towering figure entered, their armor adorned with the sigils of the Nihal High Council. Their presence alone sent a ripple of tension through the air, a silent warning that whatever was coming next would not be simple. Kara's smirk didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. Jack straightened, already bracing himself. Because if the fight in the arena had changed everything, what was coming next would change even more. Part 4, Shadows of the Dominion. The weight of the Nihal Dominion's eyes pressed down on Jack as he and Kara left the ceremonial chamber. He could feel it, not just from the gathered warriors who whispered in hushed tones as they passed, but from her. Kara walked beside him, her presence unshaken, her golden eyes scanning their surroundings with a predator's alertness. The Nihal were warriors bred for war, raised on blood and conquest. They never surrendered, never accepted defeat unless there was honor in it. And yet, Kara had chosen this fate. She had chosen him. As they stepped outside, the chill of the night air bit at Jack's skin. The twin moons of Vix Prime hung low on the horizon, casting an eerie silver light over the war-torn sands beyond the city. The arena behind them still pulsed with energy, its crowds beginning to dissipate, though Jack could feel the way their gazes still followed them. Kara walked beside him, her movements smooth and deliberate. She was too calm for someone who had just lost her claim to independence, but then again, Jack wasn't sure she saw it that way at all. They stopped near the entrance of the warriors' barracks, and Kara turned to him, arms crossed. "You're thinking too much," she said flatly. Jack huffed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I tend to do that when a woman swears herself to me in front of a few thousand screaming warriors." Kara smirked. You make it sound as though I've shackled myself to you unwillingly. Jack studied her for a moment. Haven't you? Her smirk didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. I have fought my whole life, human. I have bested foes across 100 systems, bled on 100 battlefields, and yet none of them ever stood against me like you did. She stepped closer, her golden eyes gleaming. You think of this as a loss, but I do not lose. I have merely found something worth fighting beside instead of against. Jack exhaled, watching her carefully. He had expected resentment, defiance. Instead, he was met with something far more dangerous, acceptance. So that's it, he murmured. You just follow me now? Kara tilted her head. No. I do not follow. We walk together. Jack wasn't sure why that hit harder than it should have. This wasn't slavery, wasn't ownership. It was a warrior's bond, and that, he realized, was something that meant more to her than anything else possibly could. She had chosen him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Jack let out a slow breath, shaking his head. Well, he muttered, if that's the case, I guess I'd better get used to having a 7-foot-tall killing machine at my side. Kara grinned, sharp and dangerous. Now you understand. And just like that, the battle that had started in the arena had become something else entirely, something neither of them were prepared for, but something that neither of them would ever walk away from. Part 5, The Rise of the Unlikely Alliance. The sun was barely cresting the horizon when Jack and Kara boarded the Iron Fall, Jack's personal starship. The sleek black vessel hummed with energy, its engines warming up beneath his boots. It was a ship built for war, scarred from countless battles and reinforced with stolen tech from a dozen different species. And now, for the first time in his life, Jack wasn't boarding it alone. Kara followed him inside, her golden eyes taking in the ship's interior with measured curiosity. He could feel her presence, the silent storm that existed in every step she took, in every calculated movement. She was watching him, testing him, still trying to understand who he was now that the fight was over. Jack moved toward the control panel, flicking a few switches and feeling the ship shudder to life beneath him. You ever been on a human warship before? He asked, breaking the silence. Kara ran a hand along the metal framework, her fingers tracing the scars from previous battles. No, she admitted. But I have destroyed them. Jack huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah, sounds about right. She turned, her gaze locking onto his. And now? Jack exhaled, leaning against the control panel. Now you're on one. Not as an enemy, not as a prisoner, but as, he hesitated, searching for the right word. Kara watched him expectantly, then finished for him. As a partner. Jack stilled. Because she was right. That's what this had become, not ownership, not subjugation, but a choice. A bond. A warrior's oath. Slowly, he nodded. Yeah, he murmured. Something like that. Kara's smirk returned, but this time, there was something different in her gaze, something unyielding, unbreakable. A silent promise that this was only the beginning. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her, close enough that she could have snapped his neck in an instant if she wanted to. Instead, she reached forward, gripping his forearm in the ancient Nihal warrior's clasp, a gesture not of servitude, but of absolute loyalty. You do not yet understand what it means to have a Nihal warrior beside you, she murmured, her voice low. But you will. Jack looked down at their hands, then back up at her. And for the first time since that fight in the arena, he believed her. The Ironfall's engines rumbled to full power, the ship lifting from the surface and breaking through the planet's atmosphere with a force that shook the hull. As the world below them disappeared into the void, Jack knew one thing for certain, this wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs. And whatever came next, they would face it together.